Hi, this is a video to show you how to carve a pumpkin in Fusion 360. Created this with two kind of outside shells. The inside one we actually carved so that when you put a little LED inside, you have this fun effect. Okay, so now that you've seen where we're going, let's get started. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start in the create form modeling part. And we're going to actually start with a cylinder. And we're going to pick that plane to start with. We're going to draw the bottom of the cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and type in 3 inches. We're going to use 3 inches because we want to be able to 3D print this and eventually have this where we could put this LED candle inside. So 3 inches is a good outside diameter of our pumpkin. I'm going to go ahead and click. And now what has happened is my cylinder has been built, but I still have some ability to control it over here. So my diameter, outside diameter is 3. That's good. I have 8 diameter faces around here. So that makes sense. That's what I want. The height, let's make it 3.25. We want the height about the same as the width, but we're going to leave a little bit more so we can tilt the stem over a little bit. But we need more faces than just these 4 because we want a little more flexibility. So I'm going to do 8. Now you see 8 faces going up and down. We want circular symmetry, which is there. 4 faces. That means every 4th line will be a symmetry line. I'll show you what that means in a little bit. And we can go ahead and say OK. So now we have the cylinder that we can begin to sculpt for our pumpkin. So what I want to do first is I want to select that circle or the line at the bottom of my cylinder. But you notice when I select from this side, Fusion 360 just selects the components that are wholly included in that box. So you can see that the only items that were totally included in the box that I just drew were the lines and the points on the bottom. You notice if I do it from this side, the items that would be selected includes these faces. So when you select from Fusion 360 and you come from the right side, anything that's in that selected box gets highlighted. If you come from the left, only the items that are totally included in that are selected. So I don't select my faces. So in this case, that's what I want. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say edit form. And now I have all these things that I can do. These move it up. Anything I've selected, it moves it up to the right. Actually, there's an arrow coming straight out. And then I can do just about anything I want. So now what I want you to do, though, is put your cursor right on that center circle. Click your left mouse button and move your mouse left to right. And you can see what we're doing. We're actually closing in that circle. So now, which is what we want to do kind of toward the bottom of the pumpkin. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep selecting these circular ribs of this pumpkin and begin to carve it. And I can scoot in here so I can get a little more resolution. But I'm going to begin to do that. Now here's what I would recommend. Don't move any of these out. In other words, if you want to select this one here, what I wouldn't do is do that because I really want the pumpkin to be about 3 inches outside diameter, so that we don't make it any wider than it is, so we can easily print it. So let's just keep it that way, but I can mess with all these other ones. So what I might do next is come up here and shrink in the parts of this cylinder that are going to turn into my stem. So I'm going to do that. I might come in here with the same thing, click, squeeze in. Now my stem is beginning to look better. Might come in here and do one more, a little bit skinnier. And I might want to take that line there, as you can see, just stretch it down so that my neck of my stem is a little bit skinnier. I can always do this like this to move it up. So just play around with that. Make sure it's use the center to kind of adjust their circumference of that. And then use the up and down to kind of move it up or down. So just play with this until you get something that looks good. So that's beginning to look pretty good. I do want to make sure my stem has enough room, so that looks a little bit better. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Of course, it's pretty circular, and pumpkins don't really look like that. So what we're going to do next is, you notice these symmetry lines that come around my pumpkin. I'm going to select I'm going to tilt this just a little bit, but I'm going to select the lines down the front of the pumpkin. So I'm going to select that, then I'm going to hold down Control key, select that, that, and that. You don't need to get the one at the bottom, because actually that's not going to be seen. I don't really want to move that in. But now I've got all the lines that are around the body of the pumpkin. Tilt it just a little bit more, because what you want to see is this arrow that's pointing straight out. I'm going to cover over the arrow, click with my left mouse button, and then push in. And now what you can see is happening is I'm actually putting some texture in my pumpkin. If I do the top view, then I can see I can go all the way in. That's obviously too much. So that looks pretty good. These is beginning to look more like a pumpkin. So I'm going to click out here, and I'm going to do one more version of that. I'm going to do the version of I'm going to make my neck, my stem, look a little bit better, because you can see it's round. Stems are usually have more variation than that. So what I wanted to come in here and do is select these top two lines in my stem. Now Control, click, and now I have kind of a similar thing going, and I'm going to push this in. Now here's the thing, you don't want to push it in too far. If you push it in too far and the faces overlap, you'll never be able to get this back to a model mode. So I wouldn't push it in as too much. In fact, what you can do is you can kind of zoom in and decide just to give it a little bit of shape. That's plenty right there. So now you've got that. Now you can always check to see, have you done anything with this form that makes it where it's impossible to go backwards. So you can come up here and say finish, and you see that it finished fine. Now it's back in a body mode and no errors. So that's what you want. So you can, throughout this modeling effort, you can always say finish form to see if you've introduced anything that would be a problem. But now we haven't finished yet, so I'm going to go back to my mesh mode, or my modeling mode here for forms. And now I've got to figure out a way to close this top cap, because basically I'm done with the top, but I don't want a hole in that. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to see if I can fill that hole with this command here, fill hole, and it does. Sometimes it may have a problem doing that. Just play around with it, but you can see how now I have I filled that hole. Looks pretty good. And I can hit OK. Now I would just come in here and try to finish the form again. Yep, works well. Now I'm going to do one or two more things, but let's turn off the symmetry again. Clear symmetry, and I should still be able to do a finish form. Yep. Now I want to see if I can twist this, and that's where I may have run into a problem before. So let's just see. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to turn my pumpkin stem and move it just a little bit so it gives me a little more character, and that looks pretty good. Let's just see if that introduced any problems. Nope, that worked. So just play around with that. That is kind of a showstopper. If you get to that and you can't figure out what you did to get there, you may have to start over, but this looks pretty good. So where I am now, I have one body. It has no thickness to it. As you can see, it's just some lines and faces. But now I'm ready to do to the next part. So if you remember, we want really two walls of this pumpkin. We want an inner wall and an outer wall. And we're going to carve some letters in the inner wall so that a light can shine through and you can see it when there's lights inside. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to duplicate this body. So I'm going to come over here and say copy. And I'm going to come up here and click on my pumpkin component. And I'm going to say paste. So now I have two bodies identical to each other, and I'm going to call this outer body. Whoops. Fix that. It didn't take. Outer body. And then I'm going to call this inner body. Okay, so now we have two bodies. They are identical to each other, but they still have no thickness. So what we're going to do is, before we go back to the go out of sculpt mode, I'm going to turn off the outer body. So this is just the inner body. And what we're going to do is we're going to select that. We're going to add some thickness to this. So actually we just need to come up here and say modify after we've selected it, thicken, and we can thicken it in a -2 millimeters. Okay, and make sure sharp is on here. We want the edges to be sharp edges, not curved in this case, since we're putting two of these forms right next to each other, and we can hit OK. Now it'd probably be a good idea here. Let's just see if we can finish the form and make sure it'll return to its mode. So it won't. See, here's a problem. So now it basically, by thickening it, we ended up adding some thickness that caused us a problem. So let's go return and come back and go back to that last thing. So now we have, this is what happened before we thickened it. Come back in here again. Let's do a thicken, and let's say -1.5 millimeters. And let's see if we have a issue there. So now we've thickened it a little bit less. Let's see if we can finish the form, and we can. So that's a good example. If you test it before and after you do your modifications, and that should help you not have a problem. So now we have the inner shell, the inner body with some thickness. Now we're going to do the outer body. So let's do the same thing. We're going to select the whole pumpkin again. We're going to come over here and say modify, thicken, and we're going to thicken it 1 millimeter out. And we're going to have sharp edges, and there. So let's see. So now we have the inner body and the outer body. If you look here, now you can see it. We have an outer body of 1 millimeter. This is 1.5 millimeters. So let's see if that will converge back. So let's try that. Finish form. And it works. So now we've got what we want. So now we have two bodies, an inner and outer, and now we want to carve some letters in the inner body. So I'm going to turn off the outer body. I'm going to come back and construct an offset plane against that plane right there. And I'm just going to pull out that plane so it sits just out in front of the pumpkin. And it doesn't need to be exactly. So now I'm going to come in here and do a create sketch. I'm going to create a sketch on that plane. Now I'm going to come back in here and say text. And I'm going to just put my text somewhere on the front of that pumpkin. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to type my text in over here. You can type whatever you want. You could put an image in there if you wanted to. I'm just going to make some text that is 8/10 of an inch high. And then I'm just going to move it around here so that it looks like it's right in the middle of the pumpkin. Okay, so now I can double check that. You see how it's sitting out in front. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do a press pull, and now move that where I can move it right through the shell of the pumpkin. Now you remember, I'm only doing it for the inner body. I'm not doing anything to the outer body right now. I have a cut operation going, so now I'm going to cut those letters out of the pumpkin, and now I've carved my pumpkin. So you can see what's there. That looks pretty good. And now if I turn on my outer shell, I have a inner shell that's been carved and the outer shell that is not. So now if I were to put a light inside, the letters would show up brighter than anything on the other side. So that's what I want. That's what I'm going for here. So now I'm almost done. I've got my pumpkin. I've got it carved. I've got these inner and outer shells. What I want to do is I want to make sure the bottom of my pumpkin can accommodate one of these little LED candles. So if you want to use the ones that are typically sold in stationery stores, then what I want to do is I want to make sure I cut a hole in the bottom of my pumpkin that will accommodate it. So there's my pumpkin bottom. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a sketch. I'm going to create it on the bottom plane right there. And I'm going to create a circle, center point circle right from the origin. And the hole size that I need to work with this is 1 5/8 inch. So if you can just type in 1 5/8 of an inch and do that now, that's the hole I need to cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a press pull of that hole. Let's see if I can grab that. I can let's see, let me turn off a few of these things here. There we go. So that's what I just drew. I'm going to do a press pull here, but before I click on it, I want to turn on the parts of the body I want to cut. So now I want to be in cut mode. Now I just want to look and see. So I'm actually cutting a hole through the top of that. Now what you may want to do is do both sides, because we definitely want to cut a hole in the pumpkin, and you notice that we did extend that outer shell 1 millimeter. So for us to cut through both of those shells, I need to cut up and down. So now I should be cutting it correctly. It's still in cut mode, so let me do that. And now I should have a hole the size that I need. Yep. So that's what I need. And if you can see my two edges are right next to each other. That's the reason I did the square edge, and now I should be in good shape. So this should be printable on a 3D printer, but let's make it a little more nicer to look at here, because basically what we've got is a pumpkin that kind of looks like a steel pumpkin, I think, based on this typical standard material. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go up here and say modify split body. We're going to split this body, but here's what we got. We've got a body that's all one. We've got a pumpkin that's all one color. So what we want to do is we want to color the stem one color and the rest another color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct a way to cut these two bodies together, or I want to cut these two bodies apart, and so then I can color this body one color and this body a second color. And I really only need to be working with the outer body. So I'm going to turn off all these inner bodies, and now I just have this outer body. I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to go into sketch mode, and I'm going to draw a sketch in this plane that's right now we're looking at. And I want to draw a line that just kind of separates the stem from the body, so that everything above that I'm going to color green, and everything below that I'll color orange. So now I've got a line here that goes right across. Now I'm going to finish the sketch, and now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say split body. So now I've got this outer body that I want to select. Okay, I've got that selected. Now what am I going to split on? I'm going to split on this line that goes right through there. So now you can see I'm just kind of splitting through that stem. And if I say OK, then I've got it. Now I've got another outer body. I've got an outer body. This is the first outer body, so I'm going to call this, I'm just going to leave that outer body. And this outer body I'm just going to call outer body stem. That's my stem on the outside. So now I'm going to turn everything back on. And now what I can do is I can come over here and modify appearance. And as I look at what I have a choice from, what I would do is just go in here and look for plastic, texture, and you'll see a bunch of different things you could use, but I kind of like plastic, texture, random. So I'm going to just pull this over and put it on the body. Now, if you have this symbol here, it just means you have to download it. Click that and download your texture, and then you can add it. Now that looks good, except that it's not the right color. So what happens when you move a texture over, it actually comes up here. So this is the one that we just put on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click into this, and now I'm going to edit it, because now I can pick the color I want. I'm going to actually type in pumpkin and see if there's some pumpkin colors, and there sure are. So here's a harvest pumpkin. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to just click that, OK, and now it turns that textured plastic to orange. Now, so I need a green. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to do a right click, duplicate, and now I'm going to edit that one, and I'm going to just actually call this green. And now I'm going to select the color. Let me just try to find a green that works. And let's just try that one. That looks pretty good. So now, somehow it doesn't take the first time. I'm not sure why that happened, but let's just try it one more time. OK. And now I'm going to just apply that. And now it's green. OK, so that works. So now we're done with the pumpkin. It's colored, and the last thing I think will be fun to do is just look at this in the way that Fusion can draw this thing. So now that you've got your pumpkin, it's colored, it's ready to print. Come back over here on the design tab and come down to render, and now we can look at this pumpkin in a rendered fashion. That look pretty cool. So I can turn it over. I can see the letters inside, and I can see that outer shell that's been colored. And that's how it looks. I can turn off my sketches so that this looks pretty good. And that's my finished pumpkin. So the last thing you want to do is we'll come back over here into design mode. If you look at the very bottom part, now that I've cut that circle out, I've really got a very narrow edge that I am sitting on the floor of the 3D printer. So, and if you look at it, it actually has a little bit of a curved status. So there's really not a good flat part of my pumpkin that's sitting on the floor, which means that it'll have a little problem 3D printing. So what I want to do is I want to come in here, and I'm just going to slice a very small horizontal slice out of the bottom of the pumpkin, so that I have a good firm placement, so that I can have a flat part of the pumpkin that sits on the floor. So here's what I'm going to do. I've got a plane that goes across here, so I'm going to construct an offset plane, and I want to construct it with this off of that plane. So I'm gonna move that up slightly. So let's just take a look at this from the front. So if I'm gonna construct this offset plane here, then let's see what just a 1 millimeter looks like. So if you can see this, I'm actually now, this plane sits right at that level. It's at the level that I want, because now it's going to give me a nice flat bottom to my pumpkin. So now that I've got the offset plane there, I'm going to come back and I'm going to split the body. So I'm going to do a body split, and I'm going to cut it right on that offset plane. Now, the body to split, I want to really select all of these bodies, because I want to cut every body that would be in that area from the inner to the outer. Now, the stem won't be a part of it. But if I select all of that, now I've got all of the bodies that come in contact with that offset plane. I'm going to select my cutting tool. And the best way to do that is just come over here to the plane, because now I know exactly what I've got. If I want to flip this up, now I can see that this plane right here will be my cutting edge. And if you look at it, it is going to cut just a millimeter above the floor of that pumpkin. So if I do that, now I have all these new bodies that have popped up. They're the ones that kind of sit down here below this plane. So if I start turning these off, these ones that just got created, it's not that one. Let's see. There, that one. So now I have a flat pumpkin bottom. You see that? So now this is going to be the bottom, which will print very well at the bottom of the pumpkin. So if you turn off all the ones that were just printed, you got to, make sure you just select them. You could have done it that way. But now that I've got now a flat bottom to my pumpkin, I am totally done. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to export it as a I'm gonna export it as a STL file, and it'll take a few minutes to do that, and we're done. So good luck printing your pumpkin. I hope you have good success.